Let's talk about communities, what makes them tick, and how that intertwines with moderation policy and ultimately morality. So you join a community, and what is it that makes you return over time? Think about it for a moment. A very general way of looking at it is that you come back as long as you have valuable interactions. And if we want to get slightly more concrete, it's a matter of economics. You put in some effort to communicate with other people, and you get in return something of value, and as long as what you get back is more than what you put in, then you will have a reason to come back. Now let's shift perspective a little. Let's say that you are in charge of running a Zeek community. What should your goal be then at that point? Obviously, it's up to you how you want your community to be. For example, I run the Zeek Showtime Discord server in a very different way than how August runs the Zeekcord, which is currently one of the biggest Zeek communities on Discord. But if you want your community to have more than one member in it, at the end of the day, you will need to facilitate valuable interactions regardless of what flavor you want to give to your community. This to me is the one invariant that applies to all communities, and that should drive your moderation policy. Okay, this is all very high level, and I'm sure we can all agree on these points in principle, but in practice, I know that new community owners don't look at their community through this lens. And one reason why I know this is because I did this as well in the beginning. When I first started running my own community, I was concerned with things like rules and only banning people when they broke a rule repeatedly. And I used to think that that was the moral way of running the community, but now I understand the value of interactions, and I've realized that you can do better. To explain what I mean, let's take a look at 3 examples of situations that really happened at some point in time in a Zeek community. About a couple years ago, before even ownership of the Zeekcord went to August, there was a very active off-topic discussion channel. People in there would have all kinds of discussions, including controversial topics that fairly frequently made people really mad. And obviously people getting mad is a concern for moderation. I remember very clearly a particularly spicy discussion that for some reason got into discussing the merits of prostitution. Some people were arguing that prostitution is bad because it's entirely the result of human trafficking, while others were saying that sex work is a legitimate profession in a modern secular society. Moderators were letting the conversation unroll because the rules allowed for any kind of discussion in off-topic. But at some point, one user starts saying that sex workers are dirty and that prostitution corrupts society. And that's when moderators decided that some kind of line had been crossed and that it was time to end the discussion. But this in turn made people even more mad, because from their perspective, the moderators are applying the rules inconsistently and only penalizing opinions they disagree with. So what would you do in that situation? Take a moment to think about it. In my opinion, these discussions should just not be allowed at all, because they are very low value. One example that I've already used in the past to convey how dumb these discussions are in my opinion is to imagine a community of psychologists and sociologists who do know a lot about social issues, but that for some reason start debating about programming languages. Ruby is so much better than C because it has a garbage collector. I read that C doesn't have one, so all the garbage remains where it is, making your program have code spells and eventually bit rot. That's a very good point, and to be honest, I only use C because of the cute penguin mascot. No. You're both wrong. Actually, the penguin is not the mascot of C, it's the GNU instead, and the Ruby logo says clearly a dog whistle for blood diamond mining anyway. This, to me, is what a community of programmers sounds like when they're trying to debate a controversial topic that has nothing to do with programming. So just like our fantasy psychologists walked away from that discussion having learned absolutely nothing, the same applies to the people who participated to that discussion in the Zeekcord. That said, it is legitimate for people to have opinions about things they are not experts in. And freedom of expression is a fundamental right in society. But in society, there are institutions, experts, and laws, and a judicial system. And you don't have any of that in an online community. Moderators in a Zeek server will be able to silence exceedingly dumb takes about programming, but you cannot expect them to be equally effective for every possible topic of discussion. And this to me is the point. We are used to seeing what works in our society, and so we try to replicate it in our community. But online communities are not small-scale societies. So here's my advice. Don't try to replicate society, because you will not have the resources required to do so effectively. And most importantly, you're not going to get the same benefits. As an example, freedom of expression is a fundamental right to have in society, but it's not even remotely as useful in a programming language community. And more in general, society has to concern itself with the issue of being close to all-encompassing. Like, okay, you can change, you can move to another country, it's not that easy though. While when it comes to online communities, there's a galaxy of those out there, each catering to different personas, so no individual community has to be for everybody. Instead, let's look at the value of those interactions. Discussing controversial topics that are completely outside the core competence of the community teaches people nothing, and thus, it's completely worthless. Additionally, people getting mad is a cost, and because it produces negative interactions, which drives away users, requires moderator action, and lastly, these discussions occupy the communication medium, and you cannot have a good discussion while a shitstorm is going on, which means that that's also an opportunity cost. So from this perspective, banning controversial topics does make a lot of sense because they cost a lot and pretty much never result in valuable interactions. I keep saying valuable interactions, but I haven't really defined what those are, right? I have a second story that can help qualify the term a little bit better. This happened about a year ago. The setting is still the off-topic channel of the Zcode, but things have changed since the last time. Now people are not getting mad at each other anymore. They have instead created a small channel-specific subculture within the Discord server. People in there meme a lot, and also do a lot of what can be easily categorized as horn posting. Now this on itself is not necessarily a problem, but the off-topic channel was extremely active, and at some point it started becoming increasingly problematic. People started posting very inappropriate stuff, and the memeing started leaking out to other channels, disrupting other discussions, including discussions about the development of Zig occasionally. So the wider community and many of the people involved in the Zig project are not happy with off-topic. But there's even one more less critical factor that dooms the channel. You see, while some people who participated in the Zig project did partake in the frenzy of off-topic, a lot of people in there not only were not active in the Zig community at large, but some would proudly state that they never wrote any Zig and didn't plan ever to write any because they just joined the Zcode for the off-topic channel, and that's all they cared about. Not great. And even worse than that, even though they did not intend to use Zig at all, guess who would systematically talk shit about other programming languages whenever something happened? That's right, the off-topic channel. And to be clear, I'm not talking about reasoned criticism of choices made by other projects. I'm talking about full-blown shitting on another project for no apparent reason other than blind tribalism. And that's what's still the deal for me. I explain my perspective to the leadership of the Zcode, and the rest is history. So, what's the moral of this story? Well, I guess in this case, the people engaging in disruptive behavior were getting value out of those interactions. They were having fun. But their fun was coming at the expense of other community members and even the Zig project itself. So, when managing your community, you want to make sure that valuable interactions happen, but you cannot control what other people find valuable. What you can control is which kind of people you want to have in your community. And this is a choice that you cannot shy away from, because inaction and just letting it happen is also a choice like any other. Had we not done anything about off-topic in the Zcode, the core team would have eventually moved away to another server alongside other long-term community members, all replaced by even more off-topic dwellers. So the ultimate moral of this second story is that the people that you let in your community today will strongly influence the kind of people that will join your community tomorrow. So choose wisely. In a previous story, we chose to prioritize community members who cared about being part of the actual Zig community over those who just wanted to have fun in off-topic. In this case, the choice seemed reasonable because ultimately we're talking about a Zig community. If you're running a Zig community, it makes sense that you keep a connection to the main project and that you don't create a community that is actively harmful to it. If the first story was about worthless interactions, the second story was about interactions available only to some, at the expense of the community as a whole. What happened in the Zcode was the result of it being a very big community hosted in an even more popular platform. So chances are that you will not experience the same exact phenomenon in your community, but the lesson still applies to the next story. So this one is not exactly one contiguous story like the previous ones, but more like a collection of issues that fall under the same umbrella and that tend to always have the same trajectory. One happened very recently. New person joins a Zig community and starts saying that it's incredible the Zig got const completely wrong while literally looking at C and trying to improve on it. And okay, well, maybe there are maybe better ways of phrasing this, but okay, let's say that we did. But when asked to provide more information about this stake, the user instead goes on to dispensing more wisdom about other things that Zig and other programming languages got completely wrong, once again, without any interest in going past a superficial evaluation of things. This, to me, is one example of people using discussion just for self-gratification, just to have the best stake, just to win a debate. Now, is this the end of the world? No. And maybe both parties do enjoy debating, so you could argue that both got something out of the interaction. But you know what is much, much better? When discussions are held in order to produce better practical outcomes. And that requires sacrificing some of your ego, because you must be ready to acknowledge when you're wrong, and also you need to be willing to spend your time to help others understand your perspective, like for real. If you're just trying to win a debate, when the other party isn't able to counter your arguments, you will have won, and so you can walk away. But if you're actually trying to produce better practical outcomes, you need to help others in earnest. And so if you like in your community people that look at discussions as debates that need to be won, or that in general see as competitive interactions that should be collaborative, then you will have more of those people over time, and you will push away those who use discussion to actually help each other. As I said in the beginning, it's up to you how you want to shape your community. So if you want to have, if you want debaters, have debaters. But I do think that in the long run, and especially for a Zig community, the most valuable interaction is one that leads to better practical outcomes, is the one that makes you write the better library, fix the gnarliest bug, and not the interaction that inflates the ego of an insecure user at the expense of those who want to help in earnest. So what is my recommended course of action in this case? I would say make it clear in your rules that you don't want this behavior and ban offenders right away. They're not that terrible, but you can give something better to your users, and indulging one user's bad behavior means denying everyone else valuable interactions. Don't forget this when trying to decide what is the moral course of action. To recap, help users have valuable interactions instead of trying to imitate society. Who you let in your community today dictates who joins your community tomorrow. Decide what it is that you want to value the most, and understand that you can't have it all. In my opinion, Zig communities should always have getting better at making software you can love as their top priority, but ultimately, it's up to you. Try to make your rules clear and your moderation style predictable, but once you start seeing common problems, ban. Ban without waiting for preventable damage to happen. And to conclude, know that what I just described now is not meant to be the perfect moderation style for a community, but rather like the starting point. Like if you manage to attract the right people, your community can become competent at things other than just programming, which means that you can have valuable discussions on a wider variety of topics that doesn't necessarily have to concern programming. Similarly, while I do advocate for not shying away from banning people, I can also tell you that occasionally investing in somebody who is initially not a perfect fit can eventually net you a great community member once they acclimate. I've seen this happen already a handful of times in the Zig community, especially when it comes to younger people, and it can be great. But you need to think of this as an investment that is expected to provide a return to the community. Keeping around people who have a negative net impact on the community and who show no interest in changing, that just puts a burden on the community for no reason, and accumulating these fixed costs means that you will have less budget to invest on new people. If you're looking for a set of rules to help you get started, these are the ones that I use for my Discord server, and you're free to use them if you like them. So, rule number 1, no water cooler complaints. You're allowed to complain about something in direct proportion to how much work you're doing to improve said thing. Number 2, the best opinions come from first-hand experience. You need to write Zig code to have an opinion on Zig worth listening to, for example. Number 3, the stronger your opinion on something, the more thorough your arguments need to be. Number 4, A discussion is only worthwhile if both parties get something out of it, preferably something that leads to better practical outcomes. Discussions made only for the sake of debating constitute misuse of the communication channel we're all sharing, and thus are ban-worthy. Number 5. Corollary to 4 and 3. Politeness and willingness to explain yourself is mandatory when interacting with other people in the server. If you're not in the mood for that, go do something else instead of baiting others into low-quality exchanges. Last, number 6. Don't be afraid to ask questions and clarifications, and conversely, don't assume that everybody always shares your same context and knowledge about a subject. Help minimize the number of misunderstandings, and don't be afraid to let others help you get up to speed on the topic at hand. So these are the rules that I made for my Discord server. I like them, they seem to be working well, and I don't know, maybe they can help you too. Last thing before I end the video is you can see I'm recording kinda late in the day. There's no more sun outside, so I can't have the nice effect. But the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm on a tight schedule. I really wanted to publish this video before leaving for Handmade Seattle, where I'm going to give a talk on a related subject. My talk is gonna be about imposter syndrome. And in that talk, I'm also going to mention some problematic behavior that is different from what I kind of described as like the debater persona, but that I do think is equally problematic in a community. So if you like this kind of topic, go check it out once it comes out. Actually, I'll link it in the description once the video is published. And if you want to continue the discussion, especially if you're a community owner, join the Discord server, like the Software You Can Love /Zig Showtime Discord server, and let's talk. Or otherwise, if you want to have the discussion on your turf, send me a link to your community, and I'll try to join. Thank you.